One of the most common questions you get asked is, what is the biggest time waster for senior people in organisations? You turn the question back on them, called, what is the biggest drag on your time? And the biggest drag on the time of almost every, not just senior people, but pretty much everybody in the organisation, is attending ineffectual meetings. Meetings which are badly prepared for, badly agendaed, badly facilitated, in which there are ambiguous outcomes. I mean, I've sat in meetings where we're having a preview of what was discussed in the previous meeting, and people spend about an hour arguing about what they thought they'd already agreed about 2 weeks or 3 weeks before. I've sat in meetings where people have gone through the minutes. Somebody has written their notes up from the previous meeting, and then I've had people in the same room go, that's not my recollection of what took place in that meeting. A large reason that so many meetings are such a waste of time is because they're not structured with any real discipline. That there isn't any good practice about how to prepare for meetings, both in terms of being the facilitator, but also preparing if you're attending to come and participate in meetings. There's very few ground rules about how you should behave and conduct yourself in meetings. And as a consequence of all of this, it's very rare that you see real, tangible, absolute, unequivocal, unambiguous commitments being made by people to the actions that they're going to take as a consequence of being in those meetings. So surprise, surprise, an enormous number of meetings are not particularly effective. You end up having to have meetings to fix the problems that arose because you didn't have the meeting properly in the first place. Generally speaking, I run lots of meetings with senior people. The biggest single challenge is getting people to commit to spend the right time in the room to talk about the right thing in the right way in the first place. My joke is that I run these sessions for free. What I get paid for is the sheer grunt work I have to go through to get people to sit down and participate in properly run meetings to make great decisions. And funnily enough, whenever people do this, the investment in time is nearly always way beyond their expectations. I never have anybody say, well, that was a waste of time, wasn't it? Nearly always the response is, we should have conversations like this more often. And you say, well, why don't you? Well, because I haven't got time. Why haven't you got time? Well, I'm in meetings. And what are most of the meetings about? Well, most of the meetings are about fixing the problems that arose because we didn't run previous decision-making processes well enough, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff that's now come up which we now need to go and address. And I may be overstating that a little bit, but it seems to me that bringing serious discipline to the way in which we run such processes can be transformational in the way that the business works. The cost of the business of badly run meetings is, well, first of all, bad decisions get made, and the cost of bad decisions are going to change depending upon what the decision is about, what the organisation is about. It also has impacts on people's morale. I'm now sitting in a room having the same conversation again and again and again and again. I thought we'd come to an agreement that we haven't. I think that it creates dispute and dissent in organisations by not doing these things correctly. You could sit down, I think, in a vast majority of organisations. To be honest, there have been 2 or 3 companies I've seen that actually run such things extraordinarily well, that are highly collaborative in everything that they do. And these organisations are usually extremely well known and very famous and very successful, unsurprisingly. But generally speaking, I think that the cost of not having such disciplines in the way that people work together has impacts at every single level of the organisation. Any measure that you want to use, you'll find some impact from it. The job of a coach, or indeed the job of a leader, of a manager, is to determine the way in which the team plays the game. The analogy, I'll use a sports analogy for this, that if you look at sports teams, sports clubs, that pretty much every team will have its style of play, the way in which it goes about doing things. So what's the relevance to this in business? Well, in the working environment, there's a way in which we go about doing things. And that perhaps the most significant activity that takes place in an organisation is that we talk about things, we make decisions, we make commitments to action. And that the manner and the way in which we go about doing that will have a direct impact onto the performance of the people that are playing in your team. So for me, the best advice is to determine the way in which you want to play that bit of the game, called getting people in a room to have to talk about the right thing in the right way for the right amount of time so that you can make quality decisions and quality commitments. And that to do that, people need to bring some discipline to the way in which they go about working. Discipline into the way the meeting is structured, discipline into the way that people prepare, discipline into the way that they conduct themselves when you have those meetings. You can do that and you transform performance.
Yes.
So I'm biased. You know, I work with Best Year Yet, but I believe that within Best Year Yet and Pro, producing results online, there are actual tools out there which will help you bring these disciplines to your organisation. So if you'd like to find any more about this, then I suggest you click below.